Hello again, friends, and welcome to SCLC TV. I'm Maynard Eaton. Of course, our president and CEO is Dr. Charles Steele Jr. Welcome. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Maynard.
Dr. Steele, as you well know, being the civil rights leader that you are, this week marked the 66th anniversary of a major civil rights moment, the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court decision. It made discrimination illegal. Has much changed since then, sir?
It's one thing, Maynard, to have legislation and to have a perception and an imagery of things being changed, but it's another thing to have the realization that everything changed, but everything remained the same. What this society must realize is that you can't rest on your laurels, just like in 1954, when and due all respects, and you have to the NAACP, being led by a legend in his own right, Thurgood Marshall, with Brown versus Board of Education. This was something that led to the catalyst also 1955,
right,
when Mrs. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat. So again, I go back to Brown versus Board of Education cannot be separated from other aspects, and particularly 1955 and 1964 and 1965 in terms of public accommodation, and the 1965 Voter Rights Act, which Section 4 and Section 5 was gutted. So when that was gutted, that had an impact also upon Brown versus Board of Education, because that was the catalyst of the civil rights movement. That was the impetus and the impact of 1954 Brown versus Board of Education. But 1965 Voter Rights Act was the catalyst that brought everything together in terms of freedom. And we Section 4 and Section 5 in terms of the federal government having the right to oversee and to approve or not approve in certain situations in regards to not only the southern states, but there were some northern cities and northern states that came upon this particular act as well.
But 1955 and Rosa Parks was a challenge to see if that law, the Brown versus Board of Education, was in fact going to be held up. Was that correct? I mean, that was a challenge to that.
Well, Brown versus Board of Education, prior to that, Jim Crow was the law in terms of the southern states. And let me restart the engine upon 1955 as well as 1954. Both were very complementary of each other in terms of the foundation of civil rights, in my opinion. You can have a law, but then if you don't have the enforcement of that law, the law that was passed and ultimately by the U.S. Supreme Court, if the enforcement is, which is the teeth of the law, and if it's not implemented with the implementation of impact and influence and seeing it through and follow through and making sure it happens, passing and the legislation of the law of 1954 or 1955 or 1965 has no teeth, and it doesn't mean anything.
What's your thinking about what's going on in Brunswick, Georgia, following the slaying of Aubrey Arbery? We have a black district attorney is going to be trying the case, a prosecutor trying the case. Are you hopeful justice will be served, or you still have some doubts as to whether or not this case will proceed and changes will come as a result of it? We protested, but what will come of those protests?
You're still talking about a systemic problem, regardless who's prosecuting, regardless who the authoritative person might be in terms of the law. First of all, you need to understand it's institutionalized racism within this system. And no particular individual can eradicate or remove this type of systemic problem that we have within this country and ultimately throughout the world. And it's called racism. Now, after saying all of that, I go back to Frederick Douglass in terms of power is never conceded to any degree, never has, without demand. Even though, and this is what people need to realize, we need attorneys to do what attorneys do and bring about the pursuance of the law and its reality and the truth of the law. Let us as activists get out here on the front line and do what we do. See, what's the whole problem is in civil rights now is that we don't have any collaboration. We have splendor groups and splendor situations where people want to lead and want to have their moment in the sun, for the lack of better terminology.
Or on TV or on social media, right?
You said it. Absolutely, Mr. Eaton. And this is really deteriorating the fabric of what we know is true. That is collaboration in different lanes. We have a movement in SCLC that says, stay in your lane, brother. Stay in your lane, sister. And if you're going to switch lanes, put on your signal. We have too many people not staying in their lanes. And now I don't care black, white, green, or blue. If it's touching you, then wear it. All I'm saying is that I'm dealing with the factual reality of situations. We must collaborate and have a strategy together to bring about the removal of this institutional racism that we have within the system. And if we don't collaborate, it's obvious that the enemy sees it. Dr. King said the government has never given us anything. They see it. You got to collaborate and stop bringing about an opportunity to grandstand.
What about those who argue, I know you heard it, that there is a old civil rights movement of our ilk and this new civil rights movement? Aren't the issues still the same despite the age groups?
The issues will always be the same. There are some people who are not rooted in the historicity of which civil rights is all about. And it's not about a new civil rights or old civil rights. Civil rights is civil rights because we always called hell in terms of African Americans. So it's either new hell or old hell, okay? Hell is hell. And that's what, the Jews had their Holocaust, but we had a Holocaust, and we still catching it. And hell is not a profanity, it's in the Bible, So my point is you to bring it to the forefront that generation gaps have destroyed the movement of oppressed people throughout many of years. And people need to get away from labels. There's a group of people around the world, around the United States of America, who are fighting the fact that I'm of a different generation than you are. Well, that's what the enemy wants you to do and to say. Because now we have the label of new versus old. And let me tell you something. You can call COVID-19 whatever you want to call it, new or old, is new to us. We never experienced, but in 1918, they did experience it. Now you call it new or old, they experienced the Spanish flu. But you call this new or old, it still will kill you. Just like institutionalized. Go ahead, sir.
Speaking of catching hell and COVID-19, aren't many essential workers, city workers, police, firemen on the brink of catching hell because cities are going broke, states are going broke, people are losing jobs, 32 million people out of work or more? We talking about poor in the streets. Middle class people are going on the streets.
Well, ain't no middle class, Mr. Eaton. You might be in the middle, but it ain't got nothing to do with no class. You're in the middle of being broke. You're in the middle of not organizing. You're in the middle of not understanding that this government is not your friend. This government has over $100 trillion that it can invest in its people. And that's just like me being a father to my children. And I'm not there to bag them up, to stand with them when they need me. We need the government to support us. We need the government to not let anyone who's currently working or has been working for the last year or two to be unemployed. This government could take care of that, where no one could miss a paycheck. But then we have people not even realizing the fact that the government does not care for you. If a government allow you to go hungry, to lose your mortgage, your home, to not be able to pay your rent, this is not a government that's friendly or in love with its citizenry. And we need to challenge the government on that. This is terribly so. There are other countries. One, for an example, is Canada. For all of the graduates that's finishing, the country itself, which is Canada, is allowing the graduates that's coming out of college this year a full salary because they know there's no availability of jobs. I never heard of America giving you nothing other than a setback to bring about the impoverishment of its people. When 75% of all of the people that goes to work every day, 75%, you can march all you want to, but this is the truth. When 75% of the folks that work every day live from check to check, and this government doesn't even want to pay folks $15 an hour, something is wrong with that. And I don't care what politics.
Is that just politics, or is that just politics is causing that? A current political climate, or is that just the way America has been set up, to have the haves and the have-nots?
America has always been enhanced to have majority of the people to be subservient to the leadership. As I mentioned earlier, and this discriminatory practices has always been on those who are less fortunate than others, particularly people of color. Let's call it like it is. Color folk, Negroes, black folks. We came over here from the transatlantic African slave trade. We've been enslaved for over 400 years. We built this country. We never had an opportunity to have reparation, but we are still here. And it's not enough just to survive. We need to escape. Escape racism, escape being broke, and also to have the opportunity to have access to capital.
Finally, Dr. Steele, are you more concerned now, more worried now? Are you more troubled now than perhaps all the 40 years or more you've been in civil rights? Is this the darkest time in your eye?
Not really. Not really. Coming up has always been dark for people of color. The only difference between some of us and the rest of us is that we recognize the problem. We knew and know what the problem is. Some folks, just bring about an opportunity to get along, to go along. And I'm saying that I've never been that type of individual, but I've always believed in strong relationships. But you have to tell the truth. Good friend of mine who happened to be a Caucasian told me many of years ago, Steele, I believe in everything that you all are doing in the civil rights movement, but I can't lead the movement. I'm Caucasian. I'm white. I can't lead the movement. You all have to have the courage and have the facts. See, when you deal with the facts, you can talk loud and shout, but you can't debate the facts. The facts are that racism is a virus, is hemorrhaging within African Americans, as well as people of the Caucasian race and other people of color. But the problem is why we are hemorrhaging is because we are not having a conversation. We both are internally bleeding on the inside. And because of that, we're going to die. And we will not make it better for the next generation. I'm living for the next generation and the generation after that. You're talking about Generation Z, the millennials, you're talking about the baby boomers. Stop putting labels on folks. When you're catching hell, you're catching hell. We should come together and collaborate.
Well, I imagine you're saying, like a friend of yours, Reverend Jesse Jackson, is known for saying, keep hope alive, even in this
Jesse always said that, and I love it. Keep hope alive. And Lord knows that Reverend Jesse Jackson has paid his dues.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been SCLC TV and our president. See you next week.